Welcome to the Grit and Grain podcast, where we explore and celebrate the craft beer industry, community, and history in Tacoma, Washington, and surrounding Pacific Northwest areas. Thank you so much for hanging out. Let's get to it. So welcome to the first official episode of the Grit and Grain podcast. Tacoma's, what will hopefully be Tacoma's premier beer podcast. But yeah, we're pumped to be going. So my name is Matt McLaren, and I'm here with Ron Swarner and Sean Jackson.
Hello.
And then our very first, hopefully of many guests, Shane
Honored.
fucking Johns.
Very honored. Thanks for having me.
From E9 Brewing. How are you guys?
Fantastic.
Good. What are we drinking?
I have some 2014 Avery Hog Heaven barley wine and some E9 Diablo Rouge. And our guest here brought us some West E12.
Yeah, I got upright bitter.
Oh, good call.
You know,
It's fucking great.
it
I'm
gets a little-
drinking. Katie gave me a Kolsch Pilsner, which just so happens to have won the 2019 Tournament of Beer.
Oh, yeah, shit.
so-
Nice.
Nice. I wonder who won this year.
It's all on the back of Katie right there.
E9 won the Tournament of Lagers with the detour.
Of course.
Congrats, Shane.
Thanks.
Well, yeah, we're going to talk about loggers and all kinds of shit. But so why did you bring us Westy? Out of curiosity.
This is totally an inspirational beer for me. This is one of those beers that, you know, I actually hoard this at my house. This isn't my only 4 bottles. You know, when I'm having a bad day, sometimes a good beer is what I need.
Sure.
And so, yeah, that's an inspirational beer for me. I think that it's one of the premier beers. I think that Americans just don't do it like they do over there for the quad.
Sure.
It's a truly Belgian thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's been highly developed for so
Yeah.
many hundreds of years. Like,
Totally.
Yeah. It's hard
So-
to nail it down.
Yeah, oh,
when
yeah.
we're starting, you know.
Yeah, it's hard to be
fresh.
consistent, too.
Yeah,
they
yeah,
got
for
it
sure.
dialed.
Yeah, for anybody not familiar, West Flatiron is, I mean, all the beers that they make are pretty much benchmarks of the style that they produce. So they're a traditional Trappist brewery and just make some of the best Belgian beer on the planet. And this one is actually relatively difficult to get. It's not it's not something you can just buy on a shelf in Washington State, unfortunately. But there's a lot of great similar examples out there. So if you ever see Westmalle or Roquefort on a shelf, you can get a taste of this type of inspiration. Yeah, thanks for bringing it, man.
Yeah, my
I haven't
pleasure.
had this beer in years,
My pleasure.
and I forget how crazy good it is.
Yeah.
It's insane.
So yeah, I mean, so the whole point of this podcast is to like explore Tacoma's beer history, certainly, and E9 is such a huge chunk of that, especially like it's a huge chunk of the history, but it's also, in my opinion, and probably a lot of others, the biggest chunk of Tacoma's contemporary beer market. You know, for a lot of reasons, but I'm glad you're here, man. I don't know. I feel like people don't totally know the entire story of E9 and like what, you know what I mean, like how it is now, like compared to where it was, and I don't think that a lot of people even know that you and Sean did a lot of work there together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
So
I feel like, Matt, maybe you and I are going to be on cruise control this round.
yeah, we might. Yeah. So yeah, this will be a special kind of 2-part episode for our first one because this brewery is such a fixture in this industry and community in Tacoma, and there's quite a lot to say about it. So we're going to spend 2 whole episodes saying a lot about it. But
I like it.
this first one will be hopefully the story from the beginning. So E9 opened in
1995.
as a brewery in 1995, right?
Yeah,
But-
and it was opened in the 70s.
yeah. It was a restaurant in the 70s, right?
It was definitely the Like they always took beer seriously there, which is very interesting for a place. They were like European driven. Like that would be where you
Totally.
went to go get Harp and Guinness back in the 70s and 80s.
Right.
That was like the cool spot.
Doug and I were just talking about that. That's
Yeah.
where he used to go to drink European
Totally.
beer because there was nobody else
Yeah.
even focused on that.
Yeah, I mean that's weird. Even my dad told that's where he went to drink.
Sure.
He's a big Harp guy.
All right.
So that was where he would go back in the early '80s. That was the spot to go to.
Was
He was also a
Edgehouse nine.
firefighter, so that helped a little bit.
Oh, that would do it.
in his neck of the woods. But yeah, no, yeah. I mean, I think that they had an interesting thing. I mean, their little beer program, and they had cask engines, and they really pushed their beer club, which was basically devoted towards European brewers all through the
Yeah.
80s and early 90s. And, they were the first kind of people to like glom on to doing, pouring Red Hook ESP and
Sure.
maritime beers and Hales and everything like that
Yeah.
sort of in the area. And actually, oddly enough, a lot of places are spawned from them. So the Swiss is a spawn of the E9.
Yeah.
Magoo's is a spawn of the E9.
Doyle's.
Doyle's is a huge spawn of the E9.
So when you say spawn, like you just
directly
Right.
opened by somebody that was like, I work at E9. There's more room in the market.
Yep.
I'm going to go open another place that
Right.
does very similar things.
Chris Blondin too, right? Didn't she
Yep,
work
Chris
there?
Blondin worked there too. There's a lot of people that work there. Tons of reps that have gone through.
Oh
there.
yeah.
When I actually started there, that was the part of the selling point. It was the E9 University. That's where you came, got your education.
That's right.
And then you moved on from there.
Yeah.
That was the thing.
So it's always been known for sort of like producing high quality professionals in this industry.
Yeah, I just forgot to move on. That was my problem.
Well, you're pushing it plenty while you're there now.
Yeah, I mean, I got an opportunity, and I sort of, I just sort of played to win the whole time. I was willing to lose my job, I guess.
Sure.
So push it.
Yeah. In a crazy, dynamic, competitive market like the fucking beer one, it kind of takes that.
Yeah, I mean, it's much crazier even now than it was then.
Yeah, of course.
It's insane now. I looked at the numbers today because I was doing some sales marketing stuff,
Yep.
and it was like 98 breweries that operated in Washington when I started. There's 666 or 67 now.
Yeah. Dude, I was just
Didn't want
looking at
too
that
many.
the other day.
Yeah.
I was looking at that the other
Needed to
day.
market
I didn't
these.
even know it was over 600. I thought
Yeah.
I looked at active
didn't
licenses
either.
and I thought it was 498. So that's even
Yeah,
it's not even
667.
close.
Yep.
Yep.
The Washington Brewers Festival this past weekend, or on Father's Day.
Yeah.
There were several breweries I'd never heard of.
Yeah.
There.
There was how many breweries total? It was
I can't remember, but
90 or something ridiculous. I don't
yeah,
know.
there
A lot
was
went
a
through.
lot of new ones to me.
Yeah. I have a lot of out-of-state brewers that are like, how come our beers are selling so well in Idaho and not in Washington? Well, there's 70 breweries in Idaho,
Yeah.
and there's
Yeah.
10 times that many in this state. So
Tough market.
it is, yeah, and it's kind of always been that way, and I think it stems a lot. I mean, we talked about it kind of in our first little pilot episode. I think a lot of that weirdly stems from how rich kind of the beer history in the Pacific Northwest is.
Yeah.
I think it's entirely. I don't think it's a coincidence that like Tacoma had ports that were bringing European beer in the 1880s before there was even really fucking railroads here, and then now the entire Northwest is like really one of the most like dynamic and competitive beer markets. And in terms of like general consumers, there's kind of it's like elevated in consumer knowledge really, and I think it makes a huge difference between like the Northwest and maybe other even like big metropolitan markets. Is I think people can tell the difference between good beer and great beer here, and it's probably just because of such a long, rich history.
Oh, I
So-
100% agree with that.
Yeah,
It's like New York City of beer.
dude, totally. Which is you
If
wouldn't.
you can make it here, you can make it anywhere.
That's a
There's definitely breweries that are spawned off of shift brewers in the Northwest that are now huge players in other regions of the country.
oh yeah. I mean, even on my side, like the distributor side, when we hear that somebody's moving out to like Ohio or something, we're like, dude, you're gonna destroy it out there because if you were able to do this here, you will certainly be able to do it there. And it's, I don't know, you don't really think about it in terms of like the whole US market, but all of that really stems just from how like deeply rooted in the DNA of the Northwest beer really is. And a lot of that really actually came from Tacoma. So to hear that like E9, especially considering where E9 is at now, that even in the 70s when it was just Engine House 9 and wasn't a brewery, it was still one of the earliest places focused on like high quality European beer, is kind of a testament to that actually.
Yeah, it makes sense, right?
So when they started brewing in 1995, it was mostly like European stuff, right?
As far as I know, I mean, honestly, I was not a big first adopter of E9 as beer in the 90s. I was much more Hales Red Hook
Sure.
kind of guy. Probably a lot of Widmer. But, you know, I don't know. Looking back, it's hard for me now because, you know, looking back and I talked to those guys and some of the things they were doing is such questionable practices. But,
Sure.
I mean, it was such early days of brewing. I mean, they were doing stuff that I'd laugh about if somebody told me they were doing it.
Yeah.
You know, like dump their yeast in a dish bucket and repitch that and go pick it up the day of and do it in a 5-gallon bucket that maybe they sanitized, maybe they didn't do a good job of that. They cranked beer out of that place, though. I've looked at their brew logs, and so they the first couple of years they really cranked beer. They were moving product.
Yeah.
That was a lot more in those days too. It was a lot more garage to pro. I mean, that was how
Sure.
most kids did it.
Sure.
You know, 80s and 90s, and coming into a place with a resume was any sort of actual brewing resume was incredible and a little bit rare. So a lot of
Sure.
it was like,
I think some of the history of E9 is the ownership, and it really depends on the ownership that you had at the time. And so,
I think that's probably still true today.
yeah. And so,
that's a good
at
one.
that time, it was Dusty Trail, and Dusty is a caustic individual. I get along with him fine, but there's a reason that he burned through 7 brewers before Doug came on.
Sure.
And that was in a short period of time. You're talking about 7 years, maybe.
Yeah,
He
that's
was
insane,
burning
man.
a brewer a year. None of those people were bad people. None of them weren't doing anything that wasn't being done in the industry.
Yeah.
It was just that he was such a caustic individual.
Sure.
And you had to know how to finesse him to be able to deal with it. You also have to remember you were brewing at that time. You had the Powerhouse and the E9. So the Powerhouse and the E9 are the exact same brew systems. They're Ripley stainless systems built in 1996
Yep.
in BC, and you had one head brewer, and you were responsible for all the beer at both places. You had one full-time assistant, one part-time assistant.
Yeah.
They were sort of separated between the two facilities. The Powerhouse was a little bit nicer because it was gravity transfers.
A little more space.
Yeah, a little nicer layout just because of the building.
Yeah.
Dusty was an architect, so he liked buildings.
Oh,
that's
sure.
why he has those two facilities. And yeah, I mean, and then you had the Dickens come on, and the Dickens bought the E9 but didn't buy the Powerhouse.
Yep.
And so it was a big changing of the guard. And the Dickens were, I guess the nice way to say it is uneducated on being restaurateurs and bar owners, and they got themselves in some pickles, and they didn't really, necessarily know how to operate, is what I would say.
Yeah.
And so you had a big difference there. Like Dusty was very quality driven, and he didn't really care. He also had captured the UPS crowd at the time, and had a very good regular clientele. So when I first got hired, they did really well. They did much better than I have ever been a part of. That first 2 years I worked there, they were light years ahead of anything I've ever seen since then. Financially, I guess is what I would say.
Sure.
But the beer, not because of the beer, I'll tell you that. Not because of the E9 beer.
Right.
Just because of the clientele.
I feel like there were more maybe even amount of professors and students in that building.
Yeah,
Tons of professors.
I would agree with that. You know, a couple of the brewers definitely came out of before me were UPS guys.
Yeah.
They had all sorts of questionable things that they did. They got into all sorts of little mischiefs.
Professors and students drinking in the same building?
Oh,
No
man.
way.
Throwing a lot of co-eds.
European.
And all sorts of, you got all sorts of things going on.
So I feel like the ownership changes and pros and cons of that. I think that's a great thing to touch on. But what about origin story for you personally?
Yeah.
Because you are head brewer number
9,
9.
yeah. So I was after Doug. And I worked under Doug for a while. I'd known Doug for several years before I got hired. I was actually managing a kitchen at the time of a little place called From the Bayou.
So good.
And yeah, so I had been there for a while. I was the classic biology college major that dropped out after a couple of years when I realized that I have to get a master's and a doctorate to ever make $45,000 a year.
Yep.
So, you know, I stumbled around and I became friends with Doug, and me and him have a lot of similar hobbies, is what I would say. And he was looking for a new guy up at the E9. He was getting ready to do a 2-month tour in Africa, and he was looking for a new guy that he felt confident with, that he didn't have to babysit, I guess is what I would say. And also somebody that would go skiing with him in the wintertime and was willing to work nights during that time period. And I'm totally willing to do both those things. So I was like, yeah, let's do this. You know, I don't know shit. It's basic, microbiology. It's very simple microbiology.
Yeah.
And I can learn whatever SOP you want me to learn. I understand that. And, what books you got, and that's how it sort of started. And I chafed at Doug for 4 or 5 years before he moved on. I think in the end I was probably rubbing him the wrong way a little bit, but we made some really good beers that nobody cared about, and we drank them all or threw away them. It was a weird time. Doug did a good job. He made some beers that were way before their time and nobody really cared about, and it was unfortunate. I just sort of was much more of a bulldog about those styles than he was.
Dude, being first to market with anything is really tough, man.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't the first person to make sour beer at E9. Doug was definitely the first person to make sour beer there. He had sour beer finished when I started working for him.
Damn.
I helped him bottle. We did green bottles, champagne bottles. I still have 1 bottle left.
Shit.
That was one of maybe within 2 weeks of working there, that's what I did. I hadn't actually ever drank a sour beer at that point in my life. We went to Tacoma Boys and bought some Rodenbachs and some stuff like that. And he was like, 'cause after the day was done, we didn't bottle a lot. We bottled, maybe a barrel of beer kind of thing. It was all capped too, so they weren't corked and caged. It was capped in champagne bottles. It was what did I know at that time? And, we went back. He blew my mind with Rodenbach Grand Cru. I was completely addicted to it after that.
Was that your gateway?
Yeah, that would be my gateway sour. I mean, at that time, it was really easy to get Tilliquin. It was really easy to get Rodenbachs. Any kind of lambic was available in Portland that you really
This is 2005, 6?
Yeah, 5.
Okay.
Yeah, there should have been. Yeah, 5.
Something like that.
4 or 5, yeah. So I was like, whoa, well, this is a whole new thing to me.
Yeah.
And then he actually, Doug won a GABF medal with Saison.
Damn.
And so that's what I was walking to. He had won that the previous year I started, he won it that year. We made that beer. Nobody bought it. Nobody.
That's such a bummer.
That was not a
man.
thing.
That's so
Zero
heartbreaking, dude.
buys, dude.
Because
you're
now,
talking about me sitting on barrels of that stuff. that's how we actually started the sour program. It was just like we wanted to make these beers,
Yeah.
and we were like, okay, we got 3 barrels of this left. We've been trying to sell it for 6 months. Let's do something else with it.
Yeah.
And that's how that sour beer.
So you guys
came
just
to be.
cultured what you had, and
Totally. He already had been working. He had the pleasure of because he won that GVF medal. He got sent out to Colorado for the next year.
Oh yeah.
And he smartly scheduled himself a tour at New Belgium, and that was during their infancy of the wood cellar.
Yeah.
He got to go on a tour of that, and then he chat with Lauren and whatnot, and he came back with a fire and passion, and
Oh, dude.
and that shortly fizzled out when the boss at that time was like laughed at us, you know. And honestly, Sean can say the Dickens, even during the Dickens time after Doug left, me and Sean had made a bunch of sour beer
Right.
that we were sitting on.
We made a creek, and it was about 2 years of. Gosh, it was
2 years,
close
barrels.
to 2 years.
Yeah, it was like
in barrel, and by the time ownership changed to the current owners,
ready to go.
we pretty much fucking drank the whole barrel. People would come by the brewery.
Well,
and
that was
we had an event night, and we had like a 6.5
I'll tell you,
left to sell.
That first sour beer that I bottled, I didn't drink the lion's share of it. We had a guy that came in one day, and we basically shared that bottle with other brewers.
Yeah.
And anybody that were like, oh, this guy's interested in beer. And a guy came in, and he was like, hey, man, I make my own gin. We're like, wow, that's cool.
Oh, you sound like a nerd that I want to share some shit with.
Like, let's talk about that. That's really cool. Oh, you were definitely into some nerdy yeast shit. And so we were like, oh, check out this. This is what we've been playing with. And he would come in and he would trade us bottles of his gin for our bottles of sour. And so we were doing that for a long time. So we were
trade.
Yeah, I tell you. So we were doing G&Ts in the brewery at the end of the day. And he was going home and drinking a 750 of sour. We felt like we did it for a bang-up job for that. And, Doug actually made a bunch of really good beers. It was just that nobody cared about him at the time. He made a great barley wine. He made a really nice Schwartz beer, a great Saison. The sour thing was just so obscure.
Yeah.
That would never have flown,
Yeah.
to be honest with you. It was like...
Not prior to like 2010, 11. That was people really started like.
Yeah, some kids were getting away with it, but
Yeah.
it just wasn't.
Well, you had
Wasn't the
you had
E9.
big money behind you.
Yeah,
Big money.
Right.
yeah,
The internet made a huge difference as
Yeah.
to whether or not sour beers caught on too.
Yeah.
The
Like,
Big Five is what really pushed sour beers. I always want to say that.
Yeah.
I think the Big Five doesn't get enough love, and that would be Lost Abbey, Russian River, Allagash, Avery, and Dogfish Head. And all of those have changed hands. You know, you're down to what? Allagash, Russian River, and Lost Abbey being independently owned.
Yep.
They're also I guess Allagash is monstrous, but the other two didn't grow as fast, and those guys should get a lot of credit for a lot of the second wave breweries. I think it should get a lot of credit for where we're at in brewing right now.
Yeah.
yeah. They all did a great job. Russian River, just
To this day, man.
they forced Belgian-style beers and sour beers
Yep.
on. And I remember when they came into our market, it was like, yeah, you've heard of Pliny the Elder, right?
Yeah.
If you want it, you have to buy Damnation.
Yeah.
Have to.
Supplication.
A full
like-
half barrel of
Right.
Belgian Golden. And if you want to touch the younger, you're going to have to buy Consecration. And like, it just, and it was great.
force feeding
So
everybody.
Super funny
force
because
fed
those
everyone,
beers
like-
are the ones I was trying to get.
Yeah, I know.
You're right,
That's
yeah.
like where I'm at too, man. Like, I would have traded for those all day.
I
man.
was lucky enough to go do a collaboration beer this last year, and all I wanted to do was make fucking Damnation because I miss it. And it was beautiful. So I got to go
It's a beautiful beer.
play on Shane's new playground, and I mean, it turned out pretty okay.
Yeah, it's a little different because
Way to sell it,
it's
Sean.
can condition. What's funny is that time period. I love that time period of my life. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, because I got all the beers that I really liked all the time whenever I wanted.
Yeah.
Yep.
I didn't have to try to buy a bunch of them at once. I would just be like, oh, I'm going to go to Met Market. I'm going to get Supplication and Consecration tonight. I'm going to go to Tacoma Boys and buy Tilaquin whenever I feel it for $9. It's not going to be a $40 bottle. It's going to roll in there.
Golden
'cause I had
age,
a
man.
bad day, and I need this beer right
I'm
now.
gonna pre-funk with Pepto. I'm gonna crush a 750 of the fucking sourest beer I can find.
Yeah. I mean, nowadays you have to put in a lot of work to get any of those beers, pretty much nowadays.
Dude, seriously,
Yeah.
it's like, it's a rare thing when people have them on the shelf. But it's like it's kind of gone in a weird full circle because like we're at a time now where there's so much good local stuff that everybody's import sections are shrinking, and people have no clue like how. I think a lot of people have no clue how like crazy sturdy those building blocks are. Because if you try any of those beers next to all of the beers you love now, they hold up after hundreds of years.
And it's been 3 years now, but we did a sort of a BJCP class, and I had taken for granted how available those beers used to be.
Right.
And so I went to go hunt them down as benchmarks for styles, and it was rough.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah,
Unfortunately rough. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's always Orval.
So the ownership changes made all the difference. So we're gonna take a quick break, and I'm gonna ask you about the latest ownership change, which it was a while ago, but I think it made all the difference.
Yeah, no. Honestly, Mr. Jackson here was on his way out. He was getting ready to take over the Parkway. I was looking for a new job. The Dickens were unwilling to let us push the envelope like we wanted to. They were unwilling to do some things that I felt were just necessities, which is like dry hopping an IPA. And so they had there's little weirdo things that they didn't care about my yeast purchasing, but hops were major important. Part of that is that we got to experience tons and tons and tons of different yeast strains because that was something that was just like, you need a new yeast strain? I'll buy it. And be like, I can buy whatever I want. I can do every single beer with a different yeast strain every single month if I wanted to, which is horrible practice, but it was a way for us to try new things. And so I was applying for jobs. The new ownership that we have now came in, and it was definitely let's see what these guys are about. You know, we don't know what they're about. They own a steakhouse and a nightclub, neither of which fit in my realm of wanting to be involved
Your
with.
operation, yeah.
Yeah. And so, fortunately, John is really about passionate people, and so when you come at him passionately about something, and you're like, "No, man, this is really, really what I want to do. I know it doesn't look like it can make money, but we'll figure out a way. Like, let's just figure out a way."
Yeah.
And he was, weirdly enough, he was sold on that bullshit. And so, because we never made enough money, but that's beside the point. That's
secondary, man.
Yeah, he loved the passion of it, and he thought it was super interesting. He wasn't a beer drinker at all, and so he was much more understood the wine world, and that kind of beer is easier to understand from a wine perspective. He also had great connections in the wine world, so oak was easy for us to get.
Oh, yeah.
That was really cool. So he's always been like, if I need really cool oak, I can just call John, and he can call some people that he knows, and he has definitely been able to get really cool oak for us. And so he was encouraging, He was like, all right, this is what you want to do. You seem really passionate about it. We're trying to figure out what's going on. The books are all muddled and not well put together. So let's see what you can do, kid. Basically. And so I lived for many years on the win or die model. You know what I mean? It's like,
Sure.
either I fail and go home and get a different job because these guys are going to fire me, or I just keep pushing. And so, I lived like I sort of still live like that, but we just kept pushing, and I had Sean, and we could get a lot done, and we from that point on we continued to grow. They were open to doing distribution. The Dickens didn't want to sell anything outside their own bar.
Sure.
Which hampers you because it's hard to sell esoteric beer in one little bar when you're making volume of it.
Yeah.
And so,
I actually have a question about that. But we're going to take a quick break real quick. And then, but yeah, I have a question for you.
Okay.
We're back. Thanks again for tuning in and hanging out. If you haven't yet, please do check out Channel 253. Doug, our wonderful producer, is with Channel 253, and they've done amazing work for us. And honestly, if staying connected to Tacoma as a community is something that's important to you, this is a really good way to do it. Go to channel253.com/membership. It's not very expensive at all, and it's a really easy and efficient way to find out what's going on in your town. If you're here and you care about this city, it's a great way to stay connected. So, channel253.com/membership. So you said that previous owners weren't really into, like, if they couldn't sell it in the tap room, they didn't want to sell it at all, right?
Yeah, they weren't necessarily opposed. Well, I guess they were ignorant to what was going on. So they didn't like the first oak barrels in that brewery. The first one was given to me about 7 months into. I still have that one. Into working there, Doug traded kegs of beer for it. It was what's the homebrew supply space out by McCord?
Beer Essentials.
Beer Essentials. So Beer
yeah.
Essentials was cool. They traded us some little small 15-gallon oak barrels for some beer, and Doug gave me those and was like, "Hey, go crazy."
Yeah.
And that was like, oh, I'm going to make an oak IPA, and I'm going to do all sorts of dumb things that taste horrible. And and then after that, it was like, I'm going to buy my own oak barrel. I'm going to trade for an oak barrel. I'm going to convince them to buy bourbon barrels, and then we're going to run a bourbon barrel stout, and then I'm going to turn those into mixed culture barrels afterwards. I think, I don't know, what would we have, like four or five barrels by the time X Group bought it? Was it 4 barrels or 5 barrels? It's 5 barrels?
No, I don't think it was 5.
I had a guy
visualizing the room, and I feel like we started with 2, we grabbed a couple, and then we had the 2 babies. I mean,
I think we had 4 plus the 2 babies.
just...
But that was a lot of oak
but
for that time. And we were buying those ourselves and just sticking around. We were trading for them. We were doing whatever we could. We were manipulating the system to get those oak barrels.
And it's because you guys felt like, when X Group took over, you guys felt like you had freedom to kind of dick around with this stuff?
No, I pitched it.
I mean, okay, so just the sheer difference. Again, so my time was kind of split between both ownerships.
Yep.
And the Dickens kids were always really nice to me, but there was just, they weren't giving us the tools to compete.
Yeah.
So we were trying to make competitive IPA. Because when we got together, I feel like it was like, Shane mentioned the passion, like, we're a couple fucking young kids ready to fucking roll. Like, we want to compete, and we want to put the greatest product out there. And we're trying to make a competitive IPA with 4-year-old fucking Goldings,
Yeah, Jesus.
It was no hop contracts. So, I mean, if you don't have these tools, like the sour beer was a great approach. And I'm going to go back to that barrel of Creek that we made. And again, like, it was fucking fantastic. And basically, people would just come by the brewery. We're in this transition phase where we were all like, got our little balls pumped up and ready to freaking, like, we were just like, no, seriously. Like, we know you think the beer is this way, but like, come on by and like check out what we're actually doing.
Just
And,
say we're excited about this.
So we tasted a lot of people on some stuff, and we basically drank a whole barrel of Creek. X Group kids bought the place.
Oak barrel of Creek.
And Oak Barrel Aged Creek. So one of the first things we did...
62 gallons of
Jesus
Creek
Christ.
is what he's talking about.
And we got to this point where X Group came in, and we got to do an event night. So we did an event upstairs, and we featured the Creek, and it went
Hard
over...
Day's Work was there too, dude.
Yeah, Hard Day's Work. It was sort of a showcase of what we've been doing behind the scenes.
Sure.
And it went great. We had some good support. And at that point, they were basically like, oh, this is freaking great.
Yeah.
Just to dummy this down. Like, oh, this is great. We should make a bunch of this. Like, well, that's fine. Like,
Yeah.
but here's what we need. We need lots of cooperage and we need time. And it wasn't very long after where we had like 4 more barrels, some racks. And then there was more barrels.
Yeah.
It's just
So you guys pitched it, you had them try it, and they were like, Jesus, this is crazy good. How do we get more of this?
I mean, the previous ownership, a lot of it was that old school mentality of like, oh, I can make a pint of craft beer for 10 cents and sell it for this much.
Sure.
And that was had been garbage by the time that we were in there. Like,
Yeah.
that's not how it works. If you want to compete, like, you need some support. And yeah, they took the handcuffs off of Shane, and just the idea that like I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, but I'm paying someone who does.
Right.
Let them do their job. Was
So that's like
simple idea, but it went really far. And simple things like being able to get hop contracts,
Right.
and we were still operating with garbage pail equipment, but just a lot of those little things, a little bit of faith. A little bit of not trying to handcuff, stifle creativity, and a little bit of investment. And, I mean...
Now look at you.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
So, like...
Now they keep investing.
So one of the, like, I guess industry, like one of the comments that like industry folks will say about you, Shane, is that you're not afraid to bring people in who are like, who are good at things that you don't think you're good at. Like if somebody is really good at a particular style of beer, or like, if they do things that maybe you can supplement the work that you already do. Like I've heard that comment about you a few times. Do you
Well-
think that's true?
I like people that are passionate, and
Sure.
like anybody else, I'm not a micromanager, and I understand that I'm not great at everything, nor am I passionate about everything.
Yeah.
And it's awesome to work with people that are passionate about stuff. And I've worked underneath enough people in my lifetime to not stifle people and to give them the freedom to succeed or fail. And if I can help them not fail, then that's sort of my job. My role has changed over the years.
Sure.
And I have a passion to make great beer, and I continue to try to push that. And if I can push my people, and I've been lucky, I'm not gonna lie, I've been lucky. I get a lot of great employees,
Right.
And so
That's for damn sure, dude. You guys have such an A team there, man.
Yeah, they rock literally.
yeah, and so stifling great employees is like bad management.
So have you always been like that, or do you feel like the experience of like that one last big ownership change where they kind of gave you guys the freedom to like do your shit, and then things really grew? Like, did that have an influence on,
Well,
on
no,
how you actually made
He
it?
was always like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, if I may, like, from the perspective of coming in as his assistant brewer,
Yeah.
I guarantee you, I got a lot more freedom than he did,
Oh,
You know?
yeah. Okay.
and it was
I've been lucky to work with a lot of great people and have great teams around me, and I've benefited from that. Sometimes as the head of something or the leader, you got to take a lot of shit.
Sure.
And your job is to be the umbrella for your people and let them do their jobs.
Yeah.
And I try to do that. And
You don't take any shit.
yeah, never. And I try to advocate for them, just like I would want to be advocated for.
Sure.
So, yeah, I've been lucky. I got great employees. I've had great employees. I've never, honestly, I've never not had good employees. So
That's what's up.
I try to build a team atmosphere there, and we fail as a team or succeed as a team, and if that makes better employees. I'm waiting for one of my brewers to open their own spot so I can fucking be like, yeah,
Have a place to
I won.
So Shane,
We're all waiting for that too, man. Just so you know.
I got a couple right now. They're good, man. They're real good.
About it.
so you're running a brewery. Do you have time to still write recipes?
Yeah, so that's my mental downtime. So I write recipes. I work. One of the things that I work pretty heavily with some of my younger brewers is recipe development. During our sit down chats, we discuss where they want to go and what they want to do and what they feel like they want to work on. And for a lot of people, that's it. That's one of the things. And so. We work on that a lot. We do a lot of fake recipeing, and some of those turn into beers.
What do you mean by fake recipeing?
Like we just come up with the concept.
Right.
I want it to taste like this, and I want it to be like that. Write it out.
I have a question about that actually. So I talk about this a lot, and I've waxed Ron about it a little bit. How much? So you were a chef prior to being a brewer.
Yep.
Right. So that's actually that's like not super uncommon. There's a lot of brewers that are like in kind of the echelon of people that we like talk about a lot. Were chefs at some point.
Yep.
Hollis at Skookum is a good example of that. Like makes great beer, came from being a chef. There's a lot of examples. Do you feel like that has influenced the way that you produce new beer?
Maybe I think it maybe affects how I think about formulation.
Okay,
Because
that's even a more that's what I would ask you specifically.
yeah, so it's more about how you formulate something. I'm not a great example of anything because I am the person that's never really happy.
It's a good example of a chef.
maybe that's where that comes from.
Your greatest talents, honestly.
So, for me, I go with this is what I want it to taste like. How do I get there?
That's
Instead of being like I have these ingredients and what am I going to do with them?
I'm just going to mash them together.
Yeah, and so I think that there is a definite when you start getting people to think about it that way, it's different.
I agree with that.
And I think that most people think of it more of like, what do we have right now that I can work with?
Yeah.
And instead of being like, I want to make a beer that tastes this way.
And how at every step can I support?
How can I achieve that?
Yeah, can I support this concept?
Like I need it to, the attenuation be this. How much alcohol do I need it to have a backbone for?
Right.
For the flavor, like
What carbonation to support the
totally.
mouth?
How do I make that pop aromatically? And so when you're working with brewers, that's where I go with first. I'm like, what do you want it to taste with? Well, first, usually I let them make a beer. And then I'd be like, is that how you want it?
Yeah, that's the first question
And
I ask people.
and then most of them are like, oh, Shane's asked me a trick question because he definitely would say no.
Yeah.
So definitely it's no. And then we start talking about, but you sort of got to let them make a beer first. And all the people that have worked with me or worked for me have brewed somewhere else and made beers. It's not. I have a couple of what I would call Pt.1s that I'm bringing up.
Sure.
But they're awesome, and they have realized that they need to step it and learn things in a way that's they're smarter people than I am. And so the brewers, it's never ending amounts of information to learn, right? So there's a new hop coming out every 10 days now.
Yeah, exactly.
How that hop translates into beer is never what they say. I mean, every hop now is tropical, citrus, and little floral.
Right.
You're like, well, that
Just a little.
that didn't translate at all. And so
So like people when people put beer in front of me and they're like, "Hey, tell me what you think." My first question is like always, what are you trying to achieve with this beer? Or what did you want this to be? Like, what's the pillar here? And then if they give me an answer, I'll usually ask them specific questions about what they did for each step of the process, like to achieve whatever they want. Oh, I wanted a beer that tasted, like ripe tropical fruit. Okay, so like, what are your CO2s? What's your CO2 at? What was your water like? What hops did you use? Did you have supporting hops like to kind of support the flavor that you were aiming at? And so I've been like, I feel like like going back to the cook thing, like if you're a cook and you're kind of used to composing dishes in a certain way, I think it changes how you look at how you would actually compose a new beer recipe. So if you're sitting down in your free time and you're like, the way that you're thinking about a recipe is, what do I want to make a beer taste like? Or what do I want the pillars of this beer to be? Do I want to make a really traditional beer, or do I want to blend a few traditional styles together? But you're kind of starting at the top and then kind of working your way from there down to like your ingredients and process. And I think you're right. There's a lot of people who do just look at what they have and then they put shit together. And then a lot of times it can come out muddy and not super expressive. And honestly, like, I don't know, like I said, I've kind of waxed Ron about this, and composition in beer, I think is probably more prevalent than people might consider. And I actually think that that's a huge difference between what E9 does and what a lot of other breweries do in the Northwest, but probably even particularly Tacoma. And it probably could have something to do with why E9 has been so successful even in markets that are not their home market, is that when people drink an E9 beer, it's clear what you were aiming at. And there's no muddiness. It's very clean. It's very expressive. And I feel like composition and maybe what was probably seeded in your roots as a cook might have been part of that.
yeah, I still envy those days because I got a lot more chances at stuff before I had to taste it. But no, I think that I have my own personal, like, I can pick my own beers out.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's other people that can pick them out. I definitely have my own touch on things. I definitely have sent beers to distributors that were developed by my other brewers, and distributors be like, "Yo, what the fuck?
Sure.
Like that's not you."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Yeah, I know, but I'm letting somebody else express himself."
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I have an intention. I think that if I try to, whenever I'm doing something, whether it be brewing or fishing or snowboarding or any other hobby or gardening, I have intention when I'm doing it.
Right.
And I think that's important. I think that's your self-expression. But yeah, I like everything. I know my brewers hate me because I can't help myself. I love to tweak everything.
Yeah.
Like, beer can be amazing. Be great. Win a medal. Cool.
Right.
Yeah, but we can make it just slightly better. we could tweak the water profile a little bit, just make it a little bit softer, or we can make it a little bit more crisp, or we could like, hey, let's bring let's two-step mash that.
Yep.
So that we can make it stop at this specific gravity. We could do so many things. Like, we don't have to be. I think the Budweisering of the craft beer industry, which I hate to say that, is a detriment. I think that you can make the same beers, but you can continually try to improve them. We, as a craft brewing industry, have decided that, like, hey, I made an amazing beer, and
That's the end of it.
That beer is fine.
Yep.
Let's make
You're all
the
going to drink
same
this for
the
25 years.
rest of the time. You know, and some beers are like that. Like the Westy 12, that's that beer. Like, that beer should never change. It should always taste like that. It is perfect. It is literally, if you look up the style guidelines, you're like reading the description of that
Of
beer.
Westy, yep.
But I don't think any American breweries, I just don't say that. I think that there's very few beers that are that.
That are timeless.
Yes. And I think that as a brewer, that's what you should strive for.
I think it's one of your greatest attributes is your crotchetiness about your own product. You're great at research, and your lack of I think complacency and contentment has buried a lot of fucking breweries over the years.
Sure.
Here. You know, people that didn't want to try to tweak things or keep inventing, like,
Right.
you know, and
My tap room is
not-
packed
some of
every
them are
Friday and
dead,
Saturday.
but-
Why would I change any of my beers?
some of them are dead, but they're not competing in the places and the markets that they used to.
Sure.
You know? They're not on here.
So that's like how successful a beer is outside of its own home market. That's like the only determining factor is whether or not it's good. Like there's plenty of beer that people drink all the time that, you know, it's good beer, but it's not great beer. But at least in the Northwest, a lot of the beer that people buy over and over and over is great beer. And that's like the beer that we all talk about. And
we're definitely super lucky and oversaturated with great beer.
Which
Like
is
go somewhere else
crazy.
in the country, and you will not. It's not the same
not like
deal.
this. Yeah.
You know, it is really not. I've in my youth before I had children, I totally did a lot of traveling, and I would make a specific point to go and try to hunt down great beer.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, so I go to LA a lot. My wife's from there, and the improvement that LA has had in the last 14 years is literally mind-blowing. From never being able to find a great beer from LA to being dozens and dozens of opportunities for that, and breweries that are spectacular it's crazy. To watching San Diego breweries fall apart, you know, like that is happening at a speed that is disconcerting, to be honest with you. You know, it's a wacky world. When you're talking about in less than a decade, you go from, you know, not 2,000 breweries to, you know, there's 12,000 licenses legal now.
Yep.
There's 9,700 that operated last year. I mean, you're talking about an overwhelming amount of product that's getting to the market. I literally heard that there is buyers that will literally have more than 500,000 SKUs put in front of them this year.
That's At least on my side of this industry,
mean,
that sounds like a fucking nightmare.
Think about that.
Speaking of wacky beers, I'm not going to talk about smoothie sours because you'll punch me in the face. But you were at From the Bayou, and I totally missed that cornbread.
Oh, man. You just get yourself some Jiffy?
Yeah. It was so good.
Puree those jalapenos before you put them in there.
Yeah.
A good Shane undersell. Jesus, man.
Nice job.
Or you can definitely go down to see Ben at Doyle's during Mardi Gras weekend, and Ben will take care of you.
I'm sure someone could make a beer out of that.
Maybe. It's probably not me, Ron.
Yeah,
Probably not me.
So good.
I made a million of those, so I think I might be done with them.
I ate 1 million. Literally.
Well, yeah, we'll wrap up the first episode here in just a minute, or I guess the first half of the first episode. But I kind of want to get into some nerdy sour shit.
Yeah,
the
we
second
can
one?
do that. We can definitely do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll cap it off right here, and then make sure you guys stay tuned, and we'll be back with part 2 of our Shane Johns episode. Thanks again for tuning in. Don't forget to follow us at Grit and Grain Podcast wherever you get your social media, and catch new episodes every Friday. Cheers.
This is Channel 253.